A young mother and her son vanish without a trace, only to be found murdered near her abandoned car. The crime scene is littered with eerie clues: missing shoes, scattered belongings, and 3 mysterious white buttons. As investigators chase leads, suspects emerge, and shocking twists unfold. But just when the truth seems within reach, the case takes an unbelievable turn, one that reveals a betrayal far more disturbing than the crime itself. Why did justice take decades, and who was really behind Stacy and Jacob's brutal deaths? Hey, true crime fans. I'm your host, Eamon, and I'm thrilled to share crime tales across times with you. Each episode, we'll explore a new case, examining the evidence and discussing the twists and turns. My goal is to create a community where we can discuss these cases, share our thoughts, and learn from each other. So, let's get started. Stacy Anne Falcon was a devoted young mother who always prioritized the well-being of her 2-year-old son, Jacob. On the evening of her disappearance, she followed her usual routine, picking up Jacob from the babysitter's house. There were no indications that anything was wrong. She had no reported conflicts, threats, or unusual encounters that day. Her loved ones expected her to return home safely, but she never did. A few hours later, her car was found abandoned on the side of a road, raising immediate concerns. The vehicle appeared undisturbed, with no shattered windows, forced entry, or any visible signs of a struggle inside. The location was relatively isolated, making it an unusual place for Stacy to stop. Alarmed by the discovery, authorities quickly launched a search in the surrounding area, hoping to find clues about her whereabouts. Not far from the parked car, investigators stumbled upon a gruesome scene. Lying motionless on the ground were the lifeless bodies of Stacy and her young son. Both had been shot to death in what appeared to be an execution-style killing. The shocking brutality of the crime left even the most seasoned investigators shaken. Adding to the mystery, neither Stacy's nor Jacob's shoes were found at the scene. Despite the violent nature of the murders, robbery was ruled out as a motive since Stacy's purse and other valuables remained untouched. The tragic discovery sent shockwaves through the local community. Friends and family struggled to comprehend how a loving mother and her innocent child could fall victim to such a horrific act. As detectives began piecing together the events leading up to the crime, they realized that this case was far more complex than it first appeared. With little evidence to go on and no immediate suspects, the investigation into Stacy and Jacob's murders was just beginning. As investigators carefully examined the crime scene, they discovered several puzzling clues that deepened the mystery surrounding Stacy and Jacob's murders. Scattered near their bodies were multiple bullet casings, indicating that the killer had fired several shots. The casings were collected as evidence, with hopes that ballistic analysis could link them to a specific weapon or suspect. However, no firearm was recovered at the scene, leaving investigators with little to work with in terms of tracing the murder weapon. Among the items found nearby were Stacy's personal belongings, including her purse, which remained untouched. This immediately led detectives to rule out robbery as a possible motive. Typically, violent crimes involving multiple gunshots in isolated areas suggested a personal motive rather than a random attack. The fact that her valuables were left behind raised further questions about why she and her son had been targeted in such a brutal manner. One of the strangest discoveries at the scene was 3 small white buttons lying near the bodies. Investigators could not immediately determine their significance, whether they had come from Stacy's clothing, Jacob's belongings, or perhaps even the suspect's attire. The buttons were collected and analyzed, but without a clear connection, they remained an unexplained detail in the case. Adding to the eerie nature of the crime, both Stacy's and Jacob's shoes were missing. It was unclear whether the killer had removed them, taken them, or if they had been lost in the struggle. This unusual detail baffled detectives, as it was not a typical characteristic of a homicide. The missing shoes, combined with the other cryptic evidence, left investigators searching for answers in a case that seemed to defy any obvious patterns or motives. As investigators began their search for suspects, they first turned their attention to the people closest to Stacy. Her boyfriend, Rich, and her ex-husband were both questioned extensively. Given that many violent crimes are committed by someone known to the victim, detectives needed to determine if either man had a motive or the opportunity to harm Stacy and her son. Both men provided alibis for the night of the murder, though investigators remained cautious. To further verify their statements, both Rich and the ex-husband agreed to take polygraph tests. However, the results were inconclusive, neither confirming their innocence nor indicating deception. While this did not prove their involvement, it also left detectives without definitive answers. Around the same time, investigators received a tip about a suspicious man who had been seen in the area on the night of the murder. Witnesses reported that he had blood-stained clothes and appeared nervous. The police immediately tracked him down, hoping he might provide a breakthrough in the case. However, after thorough questioning and forensic analysis, his story checked out, and the blood on his clothing was determined to be unrelated to the crime. With this lead eliminated, detectives found themselves back at square one. Despite their efforts, each potential suspect seemed to lead to another dead end. Investigators continued to search for someone with both a clear motive and physical evidence tying them to the crime. However, without new leads or breakthroughs, the case remained frustratingly unsolved, leaving Stacy and Jacob's family desperate for justice. As the investigation progressed, detectives turned their attention to another man with connections to Stacy, Scott. He was known to have interacted with her, though the exact nature of their relationship remained unclear. Investigators questioned Scott thoroughly, hoping to uncover any information that might explain why Stacy and her son were targeted. However, Scott provided an alibi that seemed solid, and there was no immediate evidence linking him to the crime. With no grounds to hold him, police had to move on to other leads. A shocking turn of events occurred just weeks later when Scott himself was found murdered. His death raised new suspicions, as it seemed possible that someone had wanted to silence him. Police launched an investigation into Scott's murder, which led them to a man named Vince. Vince had a history of financial disputes with Scott, and authorities believed these conflicts had escalated to the point of violence. As the evidence against him grew, Vince was arrested and charged with Scott's murder. Despite this development, Scott's connection to Stacy's case remained uncertain. Vince's motive for killing Scott appeared to be purely financial, with no direct ties to Stacy's murder. Investigators briefly considered whether Scott might have had knowledge of what happened to Stacy and Jacob, but without new leads, the theory remained speculative. Once again, detectives found themselves at a standstill, struggling to piece together the mystery behind Stacy and Jacob's tragic deaths. As detectives investigated Scott's murder, they uncovered a startling claim from Vince. In an effort to deflect blame from himself, Vince told police that Scott had confessed to killing Stacy. According to Vince, Scott had admitted that he murdered her to silence her about an affair. This revelation, if true, could have provided a motive for Stacy's killing, suggesting that she knew something dangerous that led to her death. Investigators dug deeper into this claim, looking for any evidence to support Vince's statement. They re-examined Scott's relationship with Stacy, questioning friends, family members, and acquaintances to determine if there had been any romantic involvement between them. However, despite Vince's claims, police found no solid proof linking Scott to Stacy's murder. There was no record of an affair, and no forensic evidence or eyewitness accounts connected Scott to the crime scene. While Vince's accusation added another layer to the mystery, it ultimately led to another dead end. Detectives remained skeptical of his statements, especially since he had a clear motive to shift blame away from himself. Without any concrete evidence, police could not confirm whether Scott had played any role in Stacy's death. Once again, the case stalled, leaving Stacy's loved ones without answers and investigators searching for new leads. Years after Stacy's case had gone cold, a new lead emerged when an inmate came forward with information. The inmate claimed that a man named Charles had been involved in Stacy's murder. According to the tipster, Charles had spoken about the crime while behind bars, providing details that seemed too specific to ignore. Investigators took this claim seriously and reopened parts of the case to see if Charles had any connections to Stacy. As detectives looked into Charles's background, they found that he had a criminal record and ties to the area where Stacy had been killed. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime scene. To verify the claim, investigators turned to forensic testing, re-examining old evidence using advancements in DNA technology that had not been available at the time of the original investigation. The results were shocking. Instead of Charles, the DNA pointed to an entirely different suspect, Jerome Jones, a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses. This unexpected revelation shifted the focus of the investigation, raising new questions about how Jones had managed to evade suspicion for so long. With DNA evidence now connecting him to the case, detectives had a stronger lead than ever before, bringing them one step closer to solving the mystery of Stacy's murder. After years of uncertainty and dead ends, the case took a dramatic turn when forensic testing identified Jerome Jones as a key suspect. Jones was a known career criminal with a history of violent offenses, but he had never been linked to Stacy's case before. Investigators discovered that he had lived in the same apartment complex where Stacy had previously resided, suggesting that he might have known her or at least been aware of her routines. Additionally, he had worked at a nightclub Stacy had visited on the night of her disappearance, placing him in her vicinity during the critical time frame. The most damning evidence against Jones came from advanced DNA analysis. His genetic material was found on a pair of gloves and a piece of duct tape recovered from the crime scene, strongly suggesting his involvement. This discovery was significant, as it was the first concrete forensic link tying a suspect to the murder. While previous leads had relied on circumstantial evidence and unreliable witness statements, the DNA findings provided a solid scientific connection between Jones and the crime. Despite this breakthrough, investigators faced challenges in building a case strong enough for prosecution. Questions remained about Jones's exact role in the murder and whether he had acted alone. Nevertheless, the new forensic evidence reignited hope for justice, giving Stacy's family a long-awaited answer about who might have been responsible for her and Jacob's tragic deaths. Further forensic testing strengthened the case against Jerome Jones, revealing even more damning evidence. His DNA was not only found on gloves and duct tape at the crime scene, but also on Stacy's body and under her fingernails. This indicated a possible struggle, suggesting that Stacy had fought back against her attacker in her final moments. The presence of Jones's DNA in such critical locations left little doubt that he had been in close contact with Stacy at the time of her murder. Despite the overwhelming forensic evidence, prosecutors were reluctant to move forward with charges. Concerns arose about whether the evidence alone would be enough for a conviction in court. Without a clear motive or direct witnesses, authorities feared that the case might not hold up under legal scrutiny. Additionally, questions lingered about whether Jones had acted alone or if there were other accomplices involved. The hesitation to arrest Jones frustrated Stacy's family, who had waited years for answers and now faced the possibility that her killer could escape justice due to legal technicalities. For decades, Stacy's mother refused to give up hope, relentlessly pushing for answers in her daughter's murder. She attended every hearing, contacted investigators repeatedly, and worked tirelessly to keep the case from fading into obscurity. Her determination to see justice served never wavered, even as years turned into decades with no resolution. She believed that the police had overlooked crucial evidence and remained convinced that someone knew the truth about what had happened to Stacy and Jacob. In 2019, her worst fears were confirmed when a journalist investigating the case uncovered a shocking truth. It was revealed that police had actually linked Jerome Jones to the crime as early as 15 years prior, yet no action had been taken against him. DNA evidence had connected him to the murder scene, but for reasons that remained unclear, authorities had chosen not to pursue charges. Whether due to bureaucratic failures, lack of urgency, or concerns over the strength of the case, this revelation was a devastating blow to Stacy's family. They had spent years waiting for justice, only to learn that it could have been delivered long ago if the system had not failed them. After years of stalled progress, authorities finally filed formal charges against Jerome Jones for the murders of Stacy and Jacob. He was arrested and indicted, and though the trial faced delays due to time and missing witnesses, Stacy's mother never wavered. In court, prosecutors presented a powerful case backed by DNA evidence and a haunting timeline of events. Forensic experts connected Jones directly to the crime scene, and the failures of the original investigation were laid bare. Jones